There's a powder sitting in your fireplace right now that the $220 billion fertilizer industry has spent decades making sure you never think twice about. Not because it is dangerous, not because it is complicated, because it is free. It is sitting in your home already, and it makes commercial fertilizer look like an expensive joke. Most people sweep it into a trash bag every winter without a second thought. They drive to the garden center the following spring and spend $40, $60, $80 on bags of synthetic amendments that a Roman soldier would have laughed at, because that soldier already knew. Because civilizations that predate the printing press already knew. And somewhere between the rise of corporate agriculture and the decline of common sense, you were made to forget. This is not a gardening tip. This is the story of how a substance that fed empires for 9,000 years was reclassified as garbage the moment it became a financial threat. Stay with me, because what you are about to learn will permanently change how you look at the ash in your fireplace and the bag in your garden cart. The substance is wood ash, plain gray powder left behind after hardwood burns. It looks like nothing. It looks like waste. That appearance is exactly what the fertilizer industry depends on, because the moment you understand what wood ash actually contains at a chemical level, the moment you understand what peer-reviewed university research says about its effect on soil, you will never purchase a bag of synthetic potassium supplement again. And that is precisely the problem for an industry built entirely on selling you back what your fireplace already produces for free. But here's what nobody tells you about why this knowledge disappeared so completely and so quickly. It did not fade gradually through neglect. It was crowded out deliberately, systematically, and with extraordinary financial precision. Let's start with the chemistry, because the chemistry is what makes this so infuriating once you understand it. Hardwood ash contains potassium carbonate, calcium oxide, magnesium, phosphorus, and more than a dozen trace minerals that plant roots require for accelerated growth, not in synthetic form, not in a factory-processed compound that your soil has to chemically break down before it can use. In a naturally buffered form that root systems absorb directly and efficiently. University researchers who have tested wood ash against commercial potassium chloride consistently find the same result. Plants fed with wood ash take up potassium at rates significantly higher than plants fed with the store-bought equivalent. The bioavailability difference is not marginal. It is the kind of gap that should have ended the synthetic fertilizer industry's dominance decades ago. And this is where it gets serious, because the science backing wood ash is not new, fringe, or disputed. It is old, mainstream, and extensively documented in the very research institutions the fertilizer industry funds. A research team in Finland ran controlled trials across dozens of experimental crop plots using birch and oak ash. Soil acidity normalized from dangerously low pH levels to ideal growing ranges within a single season. Earthworm populations tripled within 90 days of application. Biomass production more than doubled compared to untreated control plots. The researchers concluded that wood ash outperformed commercial lime and synthetic potassium combined at a fraction of the cost. A separate study from Sweden applied ash to degraded forestry land and measured root penetration depth 2 years later. Roots in ash-treated soil pushed 50% deeper than roots in untreated ground. The mycorrhizal fungal networks beneath the treated soil, the underground biological infrastructure that shuttles nutrients directly into plant cells, expanded by more than 400%. 400%. That is not a rounding error. That is a fundamental biological response to the mineral profile wood ash delivers. If this is opening your eyes, subscribe to Hidden Hacks right now, because we find exactly this kind of buried information every single week. Now, here is the part that requires you to think about incentive structures, because the science alone does not explain why you did not already know all of this. Knowledge does not vanish on its own. It requires active replacement. In the decade following World War II, The American synthetic fertilizer industry transformed from a wartime chemical production operation into a consumer-facing agricultural empire. The infrastructure that manufactured chemical compounds for military use pivoted toward peacetime agriculture with enormous capital behind it. And that capital required a return. For that return to materialize, suburban homeowners and backyard gardeners across the country had to believe that healthy soil was not something they could produce themselves. They had to believe that soil fertility was a technical problem requiring professional chemical solutions. The moment wood ash was accurately understood as a complete, effective, zero-cost soil amendment sitting inside every fireplace in America, that belief structure collapsed. So the industry did what industries do when a free alternative threatens a paid product. They funded research that emphasized edge cases. They published warnings about ash alkalinity without explaining that a $5 pH testing kit solves that problem in 30 seconds. They conflated coal ash, a genuinely toxic industrial byproduct, with clean hardwood ash, a substance humanity had used safely for 90 centuries. They cited heavy metal contamination data drawn from industrial incinerators, burning painted construction debris, and applied that data to clean firewood residue in consumer publications. The confusion was engineered, the fear was manufactured, and it worked so completely that today, the average person handles fireplace ash with more caution than a bottle of Roundup sitting on their garage shelf. Think about that inversion for a moment. A substance that built Roman vineyards and fed Amazonian civilizations for thousands of years, treated as hazardous household waste, while synthetic potassium chloride gets poured directly into family vegetable beds without a second thought. This is the part most people miss, and it is the part that makes everything else click into place. What cannot be patented cannot generate quarterly revenue. That sentence explains more about modern agricultural practice than any textbook. Wood ash from an oak log in your fireplace has the same chemical composition as wood ash from an oak log burned in ancient Carthage. There is no formula to protect. There is no proprietary process to license. There is no subscription model to construct around campfire residue. The fertilizer industry's entire business model is built on the annual repeat purchase. Every spring, you need to buy again. That dependency is the product. The soil amendment is almost secondary. A gardener who discovers that fireplace ash increases tomato yields and restores soil pH without a single bag from the hardware store is a customer that business model loses permanently. Multiply that single gardener across tens of millions of households with active fireplaces and wood stoves in North America alone, and you understand why the industry's response to wood ash had to be total rather than nuanced. Like this video if nobody has ever shown you this connection before, because this is exactly what Hidden Hacks exists to uncover. Now let's talk about what this actually means for your garden this season, because the practical reality of wood ash as a soil amendment is even more accessible than the history suggests. You do not need specialized equipment. You do not need agricultural training. You need a pH test kit, a hand rake, and the ash that your fireplace is already producing as a byproduct of heating your home. Start by sourcing correctly. Hardwood ash only. Oak, maple, hickory, walnut, birch, apple, cherry. These burn clean and leave mineral-rich residue. Never use ash from pressure-treated lumber, painted wood, plywood, particle board, or manufactured wood products. Never use ash from charcoal briquettes, which contain chemical binders, petroleum derivatives, and accelerant residue. The distinction between clean hardwood ash and industrial or chemically contaminated ash is exactly the distinction the fertilizer industry blurred in consumer warnings. Clean ash from a log fire is what 9,000 years of agricultural history rests on. Collect your ash in a metal container and allow it to cool completely for a minimum of 48 hours before handling. Active embers can survive in compacted ash for longer than most people realize, and a metal container prevents fire risk during storage. Once cooled, the ash stores well in a sealed metal or ceramic container kept in a dry location. Moisture degrades the potassium content before it reaches your soil, so dry storage is the one technical requirement the process demands. Before application, test your garden soil pH. This step takes 4 minutes and costs less than most cups of coffee. If your reading comes back below 6.5, your soil is acidic, and your plants are operating in a mineral environment that limits their growth potential regardless of how much water or sunlight they receive. Wood ash addresses that limitation directly and quickly. Apply at a rate of approximately 5 pounds per 100 square feet of garden bed. Spread it evenly across the soil surface in early spring before you plant, then work it into the top 3 to 4 inches of topsoil with a hoe or turning fork. Water the treated bed thoroughly to begin the mineral activation process in the root zone. For tomato plants already in the ground, a half cup of sifted ash around the base of each plant every 4 weeks through the growing season delivers sustained potassium support during the fruiting cycle. For root crops like carrots, beets, and potatoes, incorporate ash into the planting trench at 2 cups per 10 feet of row length before seeding. For fruit trees and established berry bushes, spread 1 pound of ash per inch of trunk diameter in a ring beneath the outermost branch spread, the zone where feeder roots concentrate. A standard household fireplace running through a typical heating season generates enough ash to treat a 400 square foot vegetable garden completely. No purchase necessary, no spring trip to the garden center, no plastic bags, no synthetic compounds, no markup. What happens next changes everything once this becomes your annual practice, because the compounding effect of wood ash on soil biology accelerates over multiple seasons. The earthworm populations that triple in the first year continue expanding. The mycorrhizal networks that expand in ash-enriched soil develop into denser, more efficient nutrient delivery systems as the seasons accumulate. The soil structure improves continuously as calcium and magnesium buffer acidity and support microbial diversity. You are not just growing a better garden this year. You are building fundamentally healthier soil that performs better every subsequent year without adding cost. That compounding return is something no commercial fertilizer product can offer you, because commercial fertilizer is designed to be applied repeatedly, not to improve your soil's independent capacity over time. The synthetic potassium chloride model requires annual repurchase because it delivers a mineral hit without restoring the biological infrastructure that healthy soil depends on. Wood ash feeds the biology, not just the chemistry. That distinction is the entire difference between a garden that improves and a garden that remains dependent on a product. And now you understand why the fertilizer industry needed that distinction buried. The Amazon tribes who built Terra Preta 9,000 years ago were not primitive. They were precise. They understood something about the relationship between fire, carbon, mineral content, and soil biology that took Western agricultural science centuries to rediscover, and that corporate agriculture spent decades working to suppress after rediscovering it. The Romans, who maintained ash storage pits on every agricultural estate, were not following superstition. They were following results. They were watching vineyards produce more fruit and grain plots deliver higher yields season after season with an input that cost them nothing beyond the fire they were already burning to cook their food and heat their homes. The fireplace in your home is connected to that unbroken chain of human agricultural knowledge. The bag of Miracle-Gro in your garage is connected to a post-war industrial lobbying campaign designed to make you forget that chain exists. Those two objects represent two completely different philosophies about where fertility comes from and who controls access to it. Subscribe to Hidden Hacks if you want to keep finding the buried knowledge that the industry needs you to ignore, because the next discovery makes this one look like a preview. You now know what the fertilizer giants spent millions ensuring you would never connect. The ash in your fireplace is not waste. It never was. It is the same substance that fed the Roman legions, built Amazonian black earth, and grew colonial American crops before a single bag of synthetic fertilizer existed. It was taken from your understanding, not your fireplace, and now you have it back.